But let's get things started with the Heisman Trophy discussion. And we got to start at the top with the favorites, which is a pair of Big Ten quarterbacks, also the quarterbacks of the top two teams in the country, in Julian Sayin of Ohio State and Fernando Mendoza of Indiana. Ty Simpson was up there going into this past weekend, but that loss to Oklahoma probably knocked him out of that race. So, Braden, between Sayin and Mendoza, who would get your vote?
Yeah, you're really splitting hairs between these two guys here. Mendoza has thrown for 2,641 yards, 30 touchdowns, which leads the country, 5 interceptions, has completed 73% of his passes. He's also been great on the ground, 216 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns there. Julian Sayin, very similar passing stats, 2,675 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, 4 picks, has completed 80.1% of his passes, which leads the country among qualified passers. Hasn't really been a threat on the ground, has 20 total rushing yards, hasn't been sacked a ton either, so he's just not really running the ball a whole lot, and has no rushing touchdowns. The quality of opponents for Ohio State and Indiana have been fairly similar for the most part. Each of them is surrounded by high-powered skill position players. For Indiana, you've got wide receivers Elijah Surratt and Omar Cooper who have been great. Roman Hemby and Kamani Black are a great 1-2 punch in the backfield. And then for Ohio State, you obviously have Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate as elite wide receivers. Both of those guys are going to be first-round picks in the next 2 drafts. And then Bo Jackson has come onto the scene as a running back. He was kind of the third guy in that running back room going into the year, and he has dominated that backfield this year. Both Mendoza and Sayin have sat for quite a bit of fourth quarters. So looking at the stats being extremely similar between these two, each of them having an undefeated team, each playing in the same conference, the best way for me to decide who would get my vote right now is to look at their top performances in their biggest games. Fernando Mendoza against Illinois, 21 of 23 passing, 267 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks. Had 13 of 23 completions, 233 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception at Iowa, and then completed 20 of 31 passes for 215 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception in Indiana's win at Oregon. For Julian Sayin, he went 13 for 20 for 126 yards, a touchdown, and no picks against Texas, when Texas was the preseason number 1 team in the country, traveling to play in Columbus. Sayin was 22 for 28 for 208 yards, 2 passing touchdowns, again, no interceptions in the win at Washington, and then went 19 for 27 for 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks at Illinois. I'm going to give the tiniest of edges to Mendoza here, but even with Mendoza, being my pick right now, looking at the betting odds, Mendoza is currently even money. Julian Sayin is plus 190. I think there's a lot better value if you were going to bet on this to bet on Sayin right now.
And I would agree with that. I also agree that of the two, I would go with Mendoza. You mentioned the stats, what they've done against the good teams. So I won't hit too much on that. And not that this matters a ton either. Both have good supporting casts, but as you mentioned, I mean Julian Sayin's thrown to probably the 2 best wide receivers in college football, and Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. Although it is worth noting that going down the stretch, it sounds like Carnell Tate's going to be out for the year with an injury. And I think too, just thinking about there's a lot of quarterbacks that would be excellent at Ohio State this year with the amount of weapons that they have. I mean, that's easily the best wide receiver room in the country. I'm not so sure how many would be able to do at Indiana what Fernando Mendoza is doing. So between the two of those guys, my vote I think would go to Mendoza as well. Now let's talk about some other quarterbacks that aren't necessarily in the same tier as those two guys right now. I should preface, but who knows what's going to happen in rivalry week or conference championship games. So Braden, I'm gonna read off a list of names here, and you say which quarterback you think has the best shot to kind of jump into that same group as Sayin and Mendoza from this list of names. So we've got Marcel Reed from Texas A&M, Diego Pavia of Vanderbilt, Gunnar Stockton of Georgia, and Haynes King of Georgia Tech.
I think that Reed is probably the only guy from this group that really has a chance at winning the Heisman. Pavia has struggled to throw the ball a little bit too often this year. Had a stretch of 14 straight quarters where he wasn't all that impressive as a passer. The Alabama game, the LSU game, the Missouri game, and then the first half against Texas. The second half against Texas, he was great throwing the football, but overall, it was kind of a sluggish stretch from him. I think that's knocked him out of the race. Gunnar Stockton probably deserves some more love. He's thrown the ball great this year, but he's almost a little bit too faceless, if that makes sense, because Georgia isn't quite as dominant. They're still a top 5 team in the country, but they aren't blowing teams out like they have the past couple of years. It's not really his fault, but I think that narrative is kind of going to go against him. I was really impressed seeing him play in person in Jacksonville. But overall, I think he's probably a little bit farther down in the race right now. Haynes King has some similar issues to Diego Pavia, albeit to a little bit lesser extent. But he's also played an extremely light schedule thus far in the ACC. If Georgia Tech finishes 11-1, Haynes King maybe lights up Georgia in Atlanta next week. Maybe there's a different conversation. He's back into the race. But as of right now, I think Marcel Reed is clearly the third best Heisman option, and the betting odds reflect that. He's around like plus 600, I think. Everybody else is at least like plus 1,500, according to FanDuel. So Reed is clearly the third best choice right now. Even after that terrible first half against South Carolina, threw 2 picks, lost a fumble, completed less than a third of his passes. But that second half comeback was marvelous. Completed 80% of his passes, 16 for 20, 298 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Just an unbelievable second half when A&M looked dead in the water against a pretty lifeless South Carolina team for most of the year. On the year, Marcel Reed's been great as well. Leads the SEC in passing touchdowns with 22, has 6 scores to add on the ground, nearly 400 rushing yards. With Texas A&M currently undefeated, he is clearly the best of the non-Big Ten quarterbacks, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it looked like Reed was going to go from being completely disregarded to, all right, he might have actually improved his odds, and that's in that second half. I think he's the easy answer of this group. I do just want to mention Haynes King. Without him, Georgia Tech, I think, would probably be a 3 or 4 loss team. He's accounted for over 3,000 yards and 24 total touchdowns while only turning the ball over twice all season. As good as Marcel Reed has been, I think King has a better. I think Reed has a better supporting cast and has turned the ball over quite a bit more than King. Again, I'm not saying that Reed doesn't deserve to be the third highest odds. The whole Georgia Tech offense revolves around Haynes King. So frankly, I think he should be getting a little bit more Heisman buzz than he is. But I would agree with you still that of this group, it should be Marcel Reed. Now, there are a couple guys who are not quarterbacks, but are playing at a level that very, very, very few players are, regardless of position. They also share a first name, funny enough. It is Ohio State wide receiver Jeremiah Smith and Notre Dame running back Jeremiah Love. Braden, do any of these guys, or either of these guys, I should say, there's only two, have a realistic shot at getting the Heisman?
I would say realistic shot, no. But if we're talking purely based off of the seasons they're having, throw out positional bias, which all the time goes to quarterbacks, Jeremiah Love would probably be my Heisman pick. He's fourth in the country right now in rushing yards, has 1,135, has 14 touchdowns on the ground. He's been great through the air as well. 274 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns there. And only Cam Cook at Jacksonville State has more all purpose yards than Jeremiah Love does this year. Love's averaging just under 6.5 yards per carry, averages 10.5 yards per catch. And after being bottled up in Notre Dame's opening week loss to Miami, he's recorded at least 86 total yards and at least 1 touchdown in Notre Dame's last 9 games. As for the other Jeremiah, Smith is pretty easily the Biletnikoff frontrunner right now, and for good reason. He has 69 receptions, 902 yards, and 10 touchdowns, plus an additional rushing touchdown that I don't remember. He probably doesn't have a chance at the Heisman. I think he's clearly, the second best non-quarterback from a Heisman standpoint, but he's likely going to be one of the best odds to win the Heisman next year, one of the preseason favorites.
Yeah, and they, to some extent, I think Jeremiah Love should be up there. He's been playing at an unbelievable level for the past 2 years. But realistically, no. I mean, if Ashton Genty didn't win it last year with 2,600 rushing yards, Jeremiah Love winning would just shatter the reputation of the award completely. Which is, again, not to say he has not been fantastic, but he won't win the Heisman. And then Jeremiah Smith, like you said, he's the best wide receiver in college football, but he's not even at 1,000 yards yet. The last wide receiver to win the Heisman was Devontae Smith in that COVID year, and he had 1,856 yards and 23 touchdowns in 13 games. That was against all SEC opponents or in the college football playoff. So despite them both being outstanding players, you mentioned Smith being a Heisman frontrunner next year. Jeremiah Love's going to be a first-round pick. They will not be the Heisman winner. And then lastly, we have to mention a defensive player. That is Texas Tech linebacker Jacob Rodriguez. 97 tackles on the season, 9.5 for loss, 7 forced fumbles, 4 interceptions, and 6 pass breakups. He also ran in a touchdown, which I'm sure had nothing to do with boosting his Heisman case whatsoever. I'm sure that was, part of a play that they had schemed up from the start of the season. We have not seen a true one-way defensive player on defense win the Heisman since Charles Woodson in 1997, and he's the only one that's ever done it. So, Braden, does Rodriguez have a case?
I mean, he has a case as maybe the best player in college football, but he doesn't have a Heisman case just because of that offensive bias. It's extremely difficult to win the award as a defensive player. You touched on Charles Woodson being the guy to do it most recently. Well, Rodriguez is having an awesome season. He's leading the country in forced fumbles. He's got tied for the, I guess, ninth most interceptions in the country with 4. There's 8 guys that have 5. Nobody else has more than that. He's 6th in solo tackles and tied for 12th in total tackles. Because he's not breaking any records and he's not playing both ways consistently like Travis Hunter did, it's a very, very uphill battle for Jacob Rodriguez. It's a great storyline. He's a great player on a very underrated and very good Texas Tech defense, but there's no shot he's going to win the Heisman.
All right, Braden, I got to disagree with you here. I got a little bit of a spicy take here. It's a down year for the Heisman frontrunners. If I had a vote, Jacob Rodriguez would be my pick. I think it's frankly insulting that he has the 9th highest odds at plus 13,000 right now on DraftKings. He's the captain of arguably the best defense in the country right now. I mentioned the stats: 97 tackles, 9 for loss, 7 forced fumbles, 4 picks. His 7 forced fumbles are the most in the country. His 4 interceptions is the most among linebackers. And not that PFF grade means anything to voters, but his 93.5 grade is the highest of any player in the country, period. It is never going to be glamorous voting for an inside linebacker. I fully get that. But the Heisman Trophy is supposed to go to the best player in college football. And to some extent, that's really not what it has been for the last decade plus. It's turned into a primarily quarterback award. But in my opinion, there has not been a better player in college football this season than Jacob Rodriguez. So if it were up to me, we would have the first defensive Heisman winner in almost 30 years.
Yeah, I like the take. I mean, I think a lot of it's the storyline aspect, which is why I think Fernando Mendoza is the leader right now. I mean, obviously he's having a great season, but he's doing it while leading a school that has had historically very little football success in Indiana to the number 2 rank in the entire country. I think that's why he's the favorite for the most part. For Marcel Reed, for example, being 3rd in the rankings, a lot of that has to do with Texas A&M being off to a 10-0 start for the first time in like 70 or 80. Actually, I think it might be the first time they've ever started 10-0.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think with the narrative on Rodriguez, I think it's a narrative that's starting a little bit too late for him to, pick up enough steam for the casual voter.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, they've only got 2 games left. Texas Tech, they're 10-1 right now. So assuming that they make it to the Big 10 champion or the Big 12 championship game, yeah, it'd be 2 games left. So it might be a little too late, but I just had to say my piece and get that out there for the world to see. So with that out of the way,